Hello everyone, I'm Firyuza and you are watching Bold Science with Firyuza. In the previous video, we asked a simple, almost naive question. Why does a shadow suddenly appear on a bright object? Now let's go further, into the territory where polished phrases end and numbers begin, resolution limits and hard physical constraints. Let's imagine that we really did manage to register something, not an image, not a shape, not a contour, but radio signals, extremely weak and sparse, collected by a network of radio telescopes spread across the entire planet and synchronized using atomic clocks. How much information is actually contained in this data? So little that even the project's own participants stated this openly. The ultimate angular resolution of the entire system is about 25 micro-arc-seconds. This is not a rough by-eye estimate. It is a result of a direct calculation, a wavelength of about 1.3 mm and a maximum interferometer baseline, roughly equal to the diameter of the Earth. Now let's compare. The estimated angular size of the gravitational radius of the supermassive object at the center of galaxy M87 is about 15 micro-arc-seconds, smaller than the resolving power of the entire system, which is 25 micro-arc-seconds. This leads to an ambiguous conclusion. The object cannot be seen as an image because its size is below the fundamental resolution limit of the observational system. It cannot be seen directly. Its shape cannot be resolved. No algorithm, no filter, and no computational technique can extract information that is physically absent from the data. According to estimates, the so-called black hole shadow has a size of about 40 micro-arc-seconds. If it were photographed with a conventional telescope with a limiting resolving of 25 micro-arc-seconds, the result would be a 2 by 2 pixel image. 4 pixels of different brightness, nothing more. 4 pixels cannot contain a ring shape, geometry, symmetry, or structure. 4 pixels are just 4 points with different intensities. That's it. In reality, the image wasn't obtained with an optical telescope but using a global network of radio telescopes. However, this doesn't change the situation in any fundamental way. The effective angular resolution and the number of independent image elements remain of the same order, and that means the amount of information is still catastrophically small, almost none at all. And this is where the most interesting part begins. Because instead of honestly saying, we have information equivalent to 4 pixels and enormous uncertainty, the public was shown a smooth, symmetric, aesthetically polished ring. Where did it come from? The answer is simple and deeply uncomfortable. It wasn't photographed. It was simply drawn. Astronomers took interferometric data and began constructing an image from their imagination, guided by black hole models. This is not a test of theory. This is fitting observation to theory. With my videos about the so-called black hole photographs, I want to show that the existence of black holes has not yet been proven. That is presented as a photograph of a black hole or of a black hole shadow is in fact only a reconstruction within the framework of general relativity. I am not alone in these doubts. In October 2018, the journal Monthly Notice of the Royal Astronomical Society published a paper by a group of scientists titled Shadows of Spherically Symmetric Black Holes and Naked Singularities. It is worth noting that Monthly Notice of the Royal Astronomical Society is one of the top journals in astrophysics and gravitation. The paper was published even before the ceremonial announcement that a black hole image had been obtained. This is because the authors were already familiar with the work of the Event Horizon Telescope collaboration on producing a black hole image and express their position. Now let us recall another fundamental important point that is often deliberately left unspoken. Before 2019, the mass of the compact object The center of galaxy M87 was estimated using a classical independent method from the dynamics of stars and gas, from Doppler measurements, from the laws of celestial mechanics, without general relativity, without event horizons, without shadows. The result of these measurements was well defined, between 3.5 and 4 billion solar masses. This was an empirical estimate based on directly observed motion of matter. And then the shadow appears, and suddenly the mass of the object nearly doubles and becomes 6.5 billion solar masses. Why? Because that is what the scientists decided, because otherwise a contradiction with general relativity would arise, because in black hole models the size of the shadow is directly tied to the mass. If the old mass is kept, the size of the shadow doesn't match that the model draws. If the mass is increased, the mismatch can somehow be reconciled. So what was done next? The mass was simply increased. A closed loop emerged. First, the model dictates what the shadow should look like. Then the mass of the object is adjusted to fit that shadow. And after that, it is announced that everything matched perfectly. But what matched wasn't what was observed. It was what had been decided in advance. This is not an experimental test of a theory. It is a self-consistent system in which the theory validates itself. And now let us ask the final but fundamental question. If instead of a black hole, the discussion were about anything else, a new chemical element, a fundamental particle, a biological object, a medical image, would the scientific community accept such a procedure? The answer is obvious, no. But here, three powerful factors came into play at once. The first, the magical phrase black hole. The second, the enormous scientific authority of a massive international collaboration. The third, a visually striking, emotionally compelling image. Critical thinking was switched off, and as a result, the following happened. A reconstruction was called a photograph, a model, an observation, curve fitting, a confirmation of theory. In 2019, the world was shown not a proof, but in an interpretation. Moreover, an interpretation closed in on itself. Imagine the following situation. Loch Ness Monster hunters sensationally announce, the first photograph in history has been obtained. After some time, they clarify, it is only a photograph of the monster's shadow. Then they add, there is no photograph at all, only a reconstruction of the shadow based on indirect data drawn by the members of the expedition themselves, because the real photograph turned out to be too blurred and useless, since it was taken from an enormous distance. How would the scientific community react to this? Most likely, all reasonable people would laugh for a long time at how the monster hunters, trying to attract attention to their research, ended up compromising their scientific activity with a cheap publicity stunt. But strangely enough, when exactly the same story happened with the photograph of a black hole, no one laughed. On the contrary, everyone applauded in unison and called it a breakthrough in science. We see that even the mere mention of a black hole strikes the human mind, turning people into passive spectators of a pseudo-scientific performance. Critical reasoning is lulled to sleep, irony disappears, and in its place arises an almost mystical reverence. If the word black hole are spoken, then belief is required without proof. Thus scientific mythology replaces science, and common sense is pushed aside, yielding to suggestion. And if science ceases to distinguish where the data are, where the model is, and where the visual effect is, it ceases to be science. It becomes a spectacle. Do you believe in the photograph of a black hole, or in the photograph of a black hole's shadow? Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. In the next video, we will look not at a shadow image drawn by experts, but at what is actually happening at the center of galaxy M87.